So just like you, I've seen the early shenanigans with Forspoken. I reported on some of that here on my channel, and I've seen all of these early reviews limited to PS5, and I thought to myself, you've been through worse. Ride to Hell Retribution, D&D Dark Alliance, the launch of Battlefield 2042. There's no way Forspoken is as bad as a majority of the reviews are reporting. Right? I can't remember seeing a game have the kind of week Forspoken has had leading up to and including the live launch. Many gaming outlets and independent reviewers snubbed and not provided a review code. I myself applied for a PC code prior to launch and was met with the sweet sound of silence. This one had weird and catastrophe written all over it. But to be fair, we've seen some of this in the past and games have thrived and continued through it. Doom Eternal comes to mind. So off to Steam I went, plopped down my hard-earned $69.99 USD, which in itself could be the sole topic for an upcoming video. And the TLDR version here is that I lasted in Forspoken for all of 63 minutes. This is LtBuzzLitebeer, and welcome to my YouTube channel, and we don't need much more of an intro than that. Now, I won't be giving you an epic hour-long breakdown on everything Forspoken, but I did want to touch on a few of the aspects of this latest offering from Square Enix. But before we dive in, if you happen to like what you see, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. And while you're at it, ring the notifications bell to receive my latest upload alerts. Okay, let's get into Forspoken. So literally 5 minutes ago, while scripting this review, I received this email from a Todd at Luminous Productions, the company behind the development of Forspoken. It looks like they're offering me some sort of letter of cooperation, which I guess translates into, hey, we want to sponsor a Forspoken video on your channel. What timing, right? Well, anyways, Todd, forget the sponsorship offer. You're getting this one for free. So before we dive off the deep end for this one, I wanted to make mention that I'm going to leave a timestamp in the video description and pinned comments below because I'm going to be breaking this one into 3 shorter segments: story, gameplay, and finishing up with PC performance. And if you want to skip around or go back to a previous segment, those timestamps will make it so much easier to do so. Anyways, so onto the story of Forspoken. And let me preface by saying that I am a video game lore hound. For me, it's as much about the journey as the destination. I actually take the time to read the presented texts, the logs. I want to know as much about whatever I am about to encounter, which not only creates a more fleshed out storyline, it also attaches me to the characters themselves. Their origin stories, drive, faults, all that context is important to me. But with Forspoken, I felt totally removed and disinterested. I mean, seriously, I was skipping through dialogue and cutscenes within the first hour of the game, which is not a good sign. Frey is just such an unlikable protagonist. Her dialogue is disjunct and jarring. Then you add in Cuff, her non-stop banter buddy, and it becomes just downright intolerable. Even when you adjust Cuff down to minimal vocal settings, because it seems even the developers could see how annoying this damn thing is, even then, the back and forth between Frey and Cuff is just not something I could get into. The whole thing feels like it was written for 2 voice actors to constantly snipe and quip, to get that organic comedic banter going back and forth, and in Forspoken, it just doesn't work. I'm not going to dissect a story, as you've probably already seen some sort of write-up about it, but the entire thing feels basic, played out, almost generic in its presentation. And the entire time, you've got Frey acting completely indifferent and just downright rude to the inhabitants of this world, babbling and arguing with Cuff, and it's just not for everyone. And let's just leave it at that. So that's kind of the short version of the story and characters, and let's next take a look at the game itself. The UI, the world building, and honestly, this is a bit of a mixed bag for me. There are so many generic, and you're going to hear this word a lot from me today, but it rings so true, generic environments, lifeless cities, constant reuse of assets. Sure, the world is truly massive in scale, but there's so little to do here. Characters are all kind of standardized, and when you are interacting with NPCs, it is just wholly unremarkable. I did want to also mention the facial animations. They're just downright bad. They are cold, expressionless, and when you pair them up with the poor dialogue, it's just a mess. The open world itself is large and pseudo-beautiful, but I honestly truly expected to be blown away with Forspoken. This is a next-gen PlayStation exclusive, and even when playing it on PC in full ultra settings, it looked a decade old. Seriously, there's nothing I saw here that really blew me away in terms of graphical fidelity. Besides the odd open-world mini-boss encounter, which are also very repetitive, this entire world serves as a farming simulator for Frey to accumulate resources, just so she can upgrade her abilities. There's nothing truly challenging or unique about any of the foes I encountered. They just kind of aimlessly roam around in these little zones until attacked, and then they're easily finished off. Now, the strength of Forspoken, and let's use that term loosely here, the strength has to be the combat and movement. It is over-the-top, flashy, particle effects going everywhere, combining parkour, speed, and elemental-infused attacks, all into a pseudo-interesting package, but after about an hour, I honestly began to see it wasn't robust enough to take on the full weight of all the shortcomings Forspoken has and try to offset them. Now, in terms of the PC port, I initially tried using mouse and keyboard, and I found it to be an unholy, unresponsive mess. Clunky and removed would be terms to describe how it performs on mouse and keyboard, and I quickly ended up shifting over to my PS4 controller, which felt significantly better. Now, two items that drove me absolutely bonkers were first, the abhorrent UI, which I'll get into in a moment, and then second, the design choice to constantly freeze Frey in place anytime there's a cutscene, anytime there's dialogue, basically anything besides exploration or combat. Walking and talking simultaneously is just not allowed in Forspoken, and I found myself constantly mashing buttons trying to break free from this freeze or just to figure out if I was finally free to move again. Make no mistake about it, this is truly a maddening design decision. Alright, enough of that. Now back to the UI, and there are so many duplications of areas, and then you have to press a certain key to open up the area. For instance, you can't just toggle between low, medium, high, ultra, settings like that. No, you first have to select the graphics tab, press a button to open it, switch to the graphics settings you want, press the corresponding key to exit that tab. I mean, it's just really clunky to work with. I'll touch more on this on the PC side of things in just a moment, but I tend to be a stickler for decently intuitive UI, and Forspoken just doesn't have it. Okay, two topics down, PC performance to go, and being upfront and honest with you here, this area for me was rough. Now, when I first saw the PC specs for Forspoken, I was shocked because what this game was asking was truly ambitious. As a point of reference, Forspoken was originally slated to launch in, I think it was October 2022, but the 4080 GPU they state is necessary for ultra settings didn't release until November. So had Forspoken launched during its original launch window, the GPU necessary to play the game in 4K 60 FPS, ultra settings was not even yet available to the public. Anyways, my rig has a Threadripper PRO 3975 WX CPU, 256 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and a 3090 Founders Edition GPU. Honestly, the only thing I was worried about going into this review of Forspoken was my GPU. Not that the 3090 is a slouch, because you know it isn't, but I do know that the latest 4000 series cards have the updated architecture, and the 4080 should be slightly faster than my 3090, but it's going to lose to the 3090 in the department of available VRAM. So initially booting up into the base game was just a messy affair. My rig was able to play the game in ultra settings 4K, but maintaining just 60 FPS was a downright chore. Even when I enabled DLSS to performance mode, it was still touch and go for frame rates. Micro stutters when turning are the norm, and in fact stutters are pretty much par for the course with Forspoken. I could see them when turning, I can see them when entering combat, or when doing a million other things in this game. Remember I mentioned jarring earlier on in this review, and that is again in play here. The stutters are noticeable, jarring, and frequent. I saw frame rate drops into the low 40s, into the upper 30s when in combat, and even when the particle effects, which this game loves to heap on you, aren't present, you're still dropping frames. I even saw 10 to 15 FPS drops just standing in a static environment. No movement, no button presses, just standing there taking it all in. The game frequently starts pulling in more RAM than it states in the requirements, which indicates to me a sizable memory leak is present here. Dropping the settings to below ultra does yield higher and more stable frame rates, but since the world already doesn't look really stunning, dropping the fidelity leads to downright ugly looking environments and textures, and I mean ugly. There is absolutely no way that a game that looks and plays like this should require these sorts of monstrous PC specs. Add in the questionable use of de novo DRM, and overall this PC port, the specs, the performance, it's all just really rough. I remember seeing those early trailers back when the game was called Project Athia, and what I saw was a concept that truly interested me. Forspoken has retained none of that vision. Frey and her story are unoriginal and uninspiring. The tone and incessant dialogue are grating and do nothing to establish belief or even empathy in anything unfolding before us. The combat, while initially flashy and interesting, quickly crumbles under the weight of all this game's other shortcomings. The world does nothing to establish itself as next-gen or cutting-edge, and the PC required specs and underwhelming performance, even with top-shelf rigs, is indefensible. In fact, the only thing next-gen about Forspoken is its price tag, at a whopping $69.99 USD. Before I go, I'd like to point out that this footage is the PC demo on full ultra settings playing in the background here, a demo that was released for PC on the very same day the base game went live, which is kind of odd, right? Anyways, it should say something when the demo plays far, far better than the live base game. My 63 minutes of live Forspoken PC gameplay ended up corrupting the very second I stopped recording, which, looking back on it now, was only fitting for such a poor showing from Square Enix and Luminous. Leave me your feedback on anything Forspoken related, and I will do my best to respond. Please remember to smash that sub button and ring the bell to receive my future upload alerts. Links to all my socials, including an open invite link to my Discord server, can be found in the video description and pinned comments below. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.